This episode is sponsored by Transcend, a veteran-owned and operated performance optimization company that I introduced recently as a sponsor on this show. Well, since then, I have actually been using my products and I've had incredible success. There was initial blood work that was extremely detailed, and based on that, they offered supplementation. So I began taking DHEA, BPC 157 for inflammation, based on the fact that I've been a stuntman, a martial artist, and a firefighter my whole life. Lots of aches and pains. Dihexa to help cognition after multiple punches to the head and shift work, and peptides. 4 months later, they did a detailed blood work again, and I was actually able to taper off 2 of the peptides because my body had responded so well to just one of them that it was optimized at that point. So I cannot speak highly enough of the immense range of supplementation that they offer, whether it's male health, female health, peptides to boost your own testosterone, which I would argue is needed by a lot of the fire service, or whether it's exogenous testosterone needed, especially after TBIs or advanced age. Now, as I mentioned before, the other side of this company is an altruistic arm called the Transcend Foundation, which is putting veterans and first responders through some of their protocols free of charge. Now, Transcend are also offering you, the audience, 10% off their protocols. And you can find that on jamesgearing.com under the Products tab. And if you want to hear more about Transcend and their story, listen to episode 808 with the founder, Ernie Colling, or go to transcendcompany.com. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show strength and conditioning coach and the Pulic Safety Wellness Coordinator for the city of Virginia Beach, Aaron McKissick. Now, in this conversation, we discuss a host of topics, from his journey into the world of strength and conditioning, the transition from sporting athletes to the tactical athlete population, injury prevention, rehabilitation, the 24-72, team builder, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of well over 1,100 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So that being said, I introduce to you Aaron McKissick. Enjoy. Well, Aaron, I want to start by saying 2 things. Firstly, thank you to Melissa Mercado for initially suggesting that we connect. And then Virginia Beach, Sean Betts, that reached out as well, made this connection. So thank you to both of them. And then I want to welcome you onto the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
So where on planet Earth are we finding you this afternoon?
In Virginia Beach, Virginia, at our fire training center. In just one of our offices. This is a pretty big complex. A lot of people coming and going around here. So sometimes it's hard to find places to do things like these. And then I'll warn anyone that listens, you might hear some jet noise. We have Oceana jet base right behind us, and it gets really loud around here. So sometimes it's even hard inside. So forewarning.
Beautiful. All right. Well, very first question. I want to go back to your origin story, as it were. So tell me where you were born and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, how many siblings.
Yeah. So I grew up in really rural Pennsylvania, Northwest Pennsylvania, in a small little town. I jokingly, when I talk to everyone, I tell them I graduated with 52 kids. So, me moving out and everything has been quite an eye-opening experience. My mom worked in a hospital setting and my father was a forest warden. From an early age, I was very active, either hiking or whatever not. And then obviously got into sports. Thought I was going to go in the medical field, kind of following my mom a little bit. Actually started school, as wanting to be a PA, did some shadowing in PA, and did it in rural setting. So all I saw was like snotty-nosed little kids and stuff like that. And I was like, this isn't interesting. And I made the switch to PT. And then once again, rural setting, and all I saw was a lot of temporal knee extensions of 70 and 80-year-old ladies and guys. And I was like, well, this is really boring. I was like, I won't like that either. So I was kind of running out of line. Then finally, I had a professor say, hey, why don't you try strength and conditioning? You're in shape guy. I think you like it, and kind of stuck with it. And it's kind of really evolved just from strength and conditioning. I've slowly came through the whole myriad of things, I'd say. So I started with working with post-bariatric surgery patients coming out of college. Then I was lucky enough to, at the time, meet ODU's team physician, Dr. Anand Kapoor, and he got me in working at ODU, doing an internship and seeing how I'd like that. So after I spent some little time there, I transferred over into the private sector and got lucky enough to where I got to train anywhere from professional athletes to Olympic athletes. And then it slowly matriculated into actually training a police academy out of the city of Hampton. So I trained them for 8 years, mainly focusing on their recruit side of things. And then I was lucky enough to gain a job with the city of Virginia Beach, overseeing all their public safety when it came to like their health and physical wellness and nutrition and stuff like that. So it's been a long haul, I'd say, from where I started.
Well, going all the way back to where you started with such a small graduating class, it seems like one of the biggest problems that we face at the moment in society is we've lost that tribal element. And I mean, the positive tribal, that kind of, it takes a village mentality. How do you look at that kind of rural closeness, if it was there, compared to, for example, the urban life that you're in now?
Yeah, everyone knew everyone where I grew up. Me working the volunteer fire department was at the very bottom of my street. So when we were kids and growing up, that's kind of a meeting point for everyone, and kind of broke out from there. Our baseball coaches to our football coaches, everyone was kind of out of there. So everyone knew everyone. And jokingly, if you got in trouble, someone's going to find out. So it's helped. And I think the other good thing is it taught me to really understand and foster close-knit relationships. And it's helped me really in the fire service and first responder world, because what I slowly learned, these guys don't trust the outside person. Like, you don't see what we see every day. You don't understand what we're doing and stuff. So I've kind of taken that close home knit community that I'm used to and infiltrated that with the fire service, and being like, hey, I want to understand what's going on in your life, and see what kind of things that we have in common, so we can grow this bond and see how I can help you. And in the term part, they can help me too. I've learned a lot from these guys, not just in the fire service or police, like just daily, everyday things. It could be mechanical work to things you can do on your house. So it's very much close to what I grew up with, blue collar. We'll say that.
Did you have any Amish communities close to you?
I did not. They're on the other side of the state. One of my groomsmen, however, he's from the heart of Amish country. So I like to throw some jabs at him.
I've seen just some beautiful videos recently. I think one of them was one of the storms or one of the fires, and the communities got together. And I think maybe even the North Carolina tragedies, and there were groups of Amish people just throwing houses up at a crazy, crazy rate. But, it's funny how society tends to look down on certain cultures, and then you look at that culture and go, wait a second, they're actually doing a lot of things a lot better than us. So have you had any exposure to that culture? And if so, what are some of the beautiful things that you've seen?
So I can say that. So my sister lives in the southern part of the state, and so they have a lot of Mennonite / Amish communities. That's a derivative, I'd say, of that, and very close knit. They come together, like you said. Like, I've never seen a house or a barn put up faster in my life. It's crazy, but they work together. I think they're really open to each other's in the community, each other's ideas, and helping out and understanding that it takes the family, right, or the community to build everything and make everything work the way they want. And I commend them in the fact that they have stuck to their beliefs for all this time, and they have or rather have an infiltration of like, hey, some outside belief, like they've really stuck to it. Where unfortunately, good and bad a little bit in the fire service. You see that, sometimes like sticking to your guns can be good, but sometimes there's too much outside influence. Hey, this is what this department's doing, and then it can create animosity. But we can talk about that more as we go. But it's just interesting that you made me think about that when you talked about communities and working together.
Well, it's just, I think what I'm learning as I'm getting older is just how important humility is. And so, for example, if you listen to Sebastian Junger talking about the Iroquois tribe in his book Tribe, there were a lot of people that were taken by the Iroquois originally, in the 1800s or whenever it was. And then they were, air quotes, rescued by the Westerners, and they ran back to the Native Americans again because their culture was actually, more enjoyable than the one they'd left in the cities. So just having the humility, no one's doing everything right. That's the thing. No one has got it down pat. They are perfect. So what is it, that we've lost in, modern society at the moment, and maybe the Amish, for example, because a number of people that you see struggling where now both partners have to work, it's absolutely, just destroying them financially for the daycare. And the problem is because we've lost that village mentality. Back in the day, the hunters were out, the gatherers were out, and then there was a certain group of people that were helping take care of the kids while everyone else was gone because they were working together. Now we're so indoctrinated that you've just got to take care of you and your house and that's it, that now everyone is kind of reinventing the wheel and having to pay the full cost rather than sharing all the kind of responsibilities and costs with an entire tribe or village.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. Like now, since you got me thinking this way, like there's a huge difference in how I grew up in a small town and the likelihood of, my parents or my mom was working and me be able to go to someone's house. It didn't have to be a close like relative. It was, it could be someone that's 3 streets over, right? And like my parents might have talked to him at baseball practice or something, but they were totally comfortably fine with me going to their house after school or whatever not. So yeah, so I think in that close-knit community that I grew up in, that you see that a little bit more, a lot of trusting, a little less issues, people coming together when you need help, and it wasn't a big thing. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, staying with your childhood, what were you doing and playing as far as exercise and sport?
Grew up playing baseball. I did like baseball for a while. Then I ended up getting contacts, and I couldn't see the ball for junk for a while, so I had to give up on that. And anyone on here that listens knows anything about Pennsylvania is a huge wrestling state. So from when I was 6 years old all the way up to when I graduated high school, I wrestled, and it's kind of like a year-round thing up there. I did some track and cross country, but that was primarily to stay in shape for wrestling. And get me a little bit of break. I did take 1 year where I played basketball, but I'm 5'8", so my basketball career is not going to last very long. But it was fun. But primarily that's what I did. I do like to cross country ski, or rather, I did when I lived in Pennsylvania and stuff like that. Now since I moved down here, I'm real lucky. The firefighting community here is very healthy. We do a lot of mountain biking on the other side of the state. Guys like to hike. My family, my wife and kids, they like to hike too. So I'm a big outside guy. I grew up in the middle of the woods for the most part. So yeah, I didn't have a whole lot of organized sports like other than your traditional ones. We didn't have soccer at my high school. We didn't have male volleyball, lacrosse, anything. So like when I got to college and people were like, "What all did you have?" I told them, I was like, it was like your 4 main sports. Mine's hockey, sorry, but yeah, we didn't have tennis, anything. So
I think there's a lot to be said just about a culture of movement and being out in nature, and just play. It doesn't have to be organized specifically. When I was in my school in Bath, which is, it's a city in England, but we didn't have a good sports program as far as, well, let me rephrase that. We didn't have a strong competitive sports program, but there was a culture. You're always doing something, PE, whether it was, literally like the Victorian wooden beams that you're doing pull-ups and climbing ropes, or if it was cross-country runs. But it created a culture of movement, and we would play football, soccer out on the concrete, and then we play rounders, which is like one-handed baseball with an old table, a chair leg that we had and a tennis ball. So you didn't have to have all the fancy stuff. People were just being out there and moving. And I feel like that's because I grew up in a rural setting too, on a farm. I feel like that's what we've kind of lost on the countryside. We've become so focused on winning, and squeezing performance. And I've said this to many of the coaches on here, arguably at the expense of the high school athlete or the college athlete's longevity and wellness, and almost dissuaded kids to simply play.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I think, I'm a big multi-sports belief where everyone should play different things, and you don't have to do year in, year out baseball, basketball, whatever. And I think the other benefit of that is, you talk about communal here, is you're going to meet different people doing different sports. If you strictly stick to basketball, you're going to see the same basketball people over and over and over and over. And it's not going to help you, especially in our field, as you get older and you go and you meet different types of personalities, individuals. Like you better learn how to talk to different people real fast if you want to make a connection. But if you're only used to one type of person, and this is how the elite basketball players and this families and that, I don't think it helps you. I think going and meeting different people and different family structures and all that can go a long way, and then just having common ground to talk and meet people, I think is a tough part for some people to do nowadays. So they're so stuck in their beliefs and their mindset rather than being open.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned about, the kind of rural setting that you were initially exposed to when it came to medicine. I've had conversations with some people as far as, almost like healthcare deserts now. A lot of these facilities are closing down, and some of our rural populations don't have, healthcare accessible anymore. You kind of grew up in that. What are you seeing, if anything, as far as the deterioration of rural medicine?
I don't make it home a whole lot. I can just speak firsthand. So where I grew up, I'll tell you, I had a bad motorcycle accident. I have a rod in my leg. Like, for me to have the rod put in, they put me on a helo and they flew me, to Erie, Pennsylvania to have it in. So like, that's the dichotomy of the difference of like the rural healthcare versus, when you get into more of a metro style healthcare and the specialties that you have. Now, I do know that our hospital system, or a small hospital where I live, like, they are also absorbed by University of Pittsburgh Medical. So like, what you're finding is big companies are coming in and taking these on. Now, I don't know what that means to the quality of healthcare or anything in these areas. But yeah, so,
So was it physical therapy that you found yourself in initially after you kind of graduated?
It was actually, I wanted to go to school to be a PA. I thought, I wanted to help people. But then when I, honestly, like I said, I saw this snotty-nosed little kid for, person after person after person. I was like, oh, this would just be boring. Like, looking at these. And then I was like, oh, physical therapy would be cool. Helping people get in shape, And then once I went in, and it was just, all right, we're going to put you on an arm bike to warm you up. Or, we're going to give you a heat pack at that time to warm you up. And then it's like, all right, stretch. All right, Miss Johnson, move the knee 10 times. I want to say this. My wife's a physical therapist. So if any PTs, like, listen, I love your job and everything, but I tell my wife, it's just not for me. Like, maybe if you're working on the professional level, or you're, working on a high level, like special ops guys or whatever, where it's a little bit different, and you're getting them back to where they need to do or what they need to do for training missions versus your active daily lives, right? I joke with our guys. I was like, PTs are great, but they don't understand the job of a fireman, right? Their job is to get you back to where you were, and so you can, I jokingly say, so you can wipe your butt, right? Their job is not to get you to be able to climb to the 36th floor of the Westin, under gear, everything like that. That's not what their objective is. That's what your objective is, to make sure you can do that efficiently. But their objective is not that. And so I'm that bridge to that position.
Absolutely. Well, we'll take a deep dive in that, because that's exactly what I encountered after meniscus surgeries and a back injury as far as the PT side. You mentioned about taking care of people after bariatric surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Firstly, I want to talk about some of the options that are available now as far as people in obesity, but just talk to me about that experience in general.
Yeah, so that was very interesting because you could have someone coming in that could walk through the door, right? And this was usually 6 weeks post bariatric surgery. You could have someone walk through the doors fine. And I've had people come through on rascals, right? Little cars, and you're like, okay, you got to help them and teach them and educate them on what kind of exercises they should be doing, that's within their capability. So I had to learn real fast early in my career how to be creative, because if you can't get someone up out of a wheelchair, like what are you going to do if like your whole mindset says, oh, we're going to do these air squats or whatever not. So it taught me how to be real creative and learn and use whatever equipment I have around me, so to speak. So that was very interesting. And then I think what was more challenging for me was to understand their psyche. Like you got to mix it. Like these people obviously wanted to get better, right? Now, to the level that they want to get better, I I couldn't really tell you. Like sometimes I felt like, yeah, they want to make lifelong changes and personality changes, and that's what it was going to take to be really healthy, right? A psychological change of how you handle your daily lives. But I think there's then others that just wanted a quick fix, right? Oh, I want to lose some weight and whatever. And then, okay, I've lost this weight. Now I can go back to eating how I normally do because now I'm skinny. So it was very interesting to try to get a better understanding of their psyches, when we were going through this whole process. Learning different ways to train individuals, talk to people, and understanding psyches was a huge part of just my bariatric experience in general. That once again, it's helped me in this field, in this career, because some people want to go and become the fire chief, and some people want to stay the base level guy that wants to just ride the truck for 30 years. So it's you have to understand that everyone has different goals, admirations, and everything. But at the end of the day, just like the bariatric person wanted to lose weight, this guy wants to be a fireman and wants to be good at his job. So you find the core of what they're trying to get out of.
Did you ever kind of come across what seemed to be common denominators between the backstory of some of these people that were, grossly obese?
Uh, unfortunately, I would say a lot of them came from less than affluent communities or families. I wouldn't say I had people coming through the door that told me that on a normal day that were like, I make six figures, right? Like that was the majority of the time wasn't those people. It was people that were on Medicare, Medicaid, stuff like that. Unfortunately, and it was reactive to things and health issues that have happened in life rather than the proactive side, which I think is a whole nother day of discussion as far as how medicine treats us nowadays. I'm more, let's be proactive. Now we'll get it on the backside. So, but that's primarily what I found is like, like I said, like there wasn't a lot of people that were, in my experience now, I'm not saying this is nationwide, like that these are individuals that tend to come from a little harder situations, so.
Yeah, I think it's such an important point, and it mirrors again going to the fire service when I talk about firefighter fitness and firefighter fitness standards and that kind of thing. Is ownership is part of it, but environment is the other part. So, for example, if you have woeful understaffing because of decades of mismanagement, and now you got people working 56, 80-hour work weeks, then that's setting them up for failure. And I know we're going to take a deep dive into that. And it's the same though with, obesity in America. It's all very well for me to stand on some, ivory tower and say, well, everyone should just make good choices. Well, I grew up on a farm in England where we had vegetables and we had animals, and, I had movement woven into my everyday. If I wanted to go to the bus stop to school, it was like I forget exactly, like a 1.5 mile walk each way. If I want to go to town, it was more like 2 miles. So, my environment was very different than someone that grew up in the inner city, where maybe the bodega or the local liquor store was where we got our food. You know what I mean? And then the local place to play maybe was riddled with gangs. So very, very different. So unpacking the why behind it rather than shaming people for being obese, we got to say, are we setting up an environment for health? And post COVID, we should have figured a lot of this out. We should have really kind of double down on local organic food and bolstering the farmers there, and removing the shit food from school and putting real food in, and PE programs and pedestrianized downtowns. but none of
Yeah.
that was done. And so this is what really, saddens me is we'll talk about certain incidents based on, race or whatever it is, but obesity is killing millions of Americans. And you don't see any of these kind of ethnic figures standing up advocating against that, or fentanyl overdose, or all these other areas, because this is a product of the environment. And you can't just make good choices when your entire baseline is completely related to this distorted reality that you've been raised in.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's tough. When you look at this, you have to look how people are raised, what kind of community foods they like to eat, and stuff like. There's a lot of stuff that comes into just poor health decisions. It's not just they woke up one day and they're like, oh, I just want to eat Doritos, right? Like I feel like eating habits are kind of built. Like I have two 6-year-old twins, right, and their eating habits are going to be slightly based off of what me and my wife feed them, right? Let's be honest. So I think that's important to know. Like, if you have a little one, get them used to eating the vegetables. I'm not saying you got to just feed nothing but vegetables to them. Like they're little kids, right? But like introduce them to different foods and activity and play. Going back to what we talked about earlier. So that's one thing. Even though my girls are 6, I in my head, I can't fathom. I'm like, why do you want to be inside? Like all I remember when I was a kid was I was outside in the neighborhood playing with everyone, riding bikes or doing sports and stuff. I was like, I can't. You have a twin sister and you guys don't even want to play outside kicking the ball around. I'm like, oh well, we did that all day at summer camp. I'm like, so what? So I just find it interesting when you look at this all together and just like how shifts in community and technology's been good, but technology's been real bad for us as well. So
what about the successes of the bariatric patients? I've lost a fire academy classmate and my wife's best friend to side effects from bariatric surgery.
yes.
And, I think that it has a place if you are literally at death's door. It's kind of a Hail Mary on the surgical side. But I feel like, certainly both of those two were no means, morbidly obese. They were overweight, definitely, maybe clinically obese, but not to the point of, an emergency action needing to be happened. So what is your perspective of the efficacy and the dangers of that particular routine surgery?
So that's a great question. So, I've seen as old into like, I think 61 or 62, and I've seen as young as 18, right? I think doing it at 18, so I remember I had one doctor who was like strictly against like doing them young. He's like, no, they still have time to make life choices and changes. I think exactly what you talked about. If it comes to a point where, you're starting to knock on death's door, right? Let's go ahead and do those measures. However, I do think that if we had healthcare programs in place, right, that would, allow you to like use your insurance, right, to go get fitness, to go get nutrition, food training, whatever. I think it would go a long ways versus paying. I don't even know what the amount of how much it costs for bariatric surgeries now, but paying, let's just say $15,000 to have this surgery done, right? I just think it's the wrong way to look at things. Like, let's be proactive, right? And the long-term cost is a lot less, right? Versus, okay, we'll keep feeding you diabetes medicine, all this, blood pressure medicine, up this, and then, okay, now we're going to throw this huge price tag surgery on you at the end, right? Just to kind of bring you back down to where you should have been had we been proactive right off the bat. So, I think it's tough. I get it. People want to try to make better health decisions, and sometimes they wait too long into the game. But I just think we need to be more proactive, especially when it comes to bariatric surgery and stuff like that. So,
yeah, certainly the proactive side, like I said, that's where we should be at. But after a pandemic, if still no action happened, then I don't know when it's going to happen. So it's up to the people on the ground to really push and vote with their dollar as well. But I had a guy on, Johan Hari, talking about Ozempic. He wrote a whole book on it.
Okay.
And what's interesting about that, I'm again opposed to anyone who's just trying to lose a little weight using that, because it just doesn't make any sense to risk, pharmaceutical when you just need to be patient and diligent. And if you've got the tools and you got the ability to do that, then that's hands down the best route. But if you are now getting towards the more obese side, I think what's good about Ozempic is it's a much safer alternative to bariatric surgery. And it does seem to be
Yeah.
very effective as well. So I think, again, there's no black and white. I think that's the middle ground for those kind of drugs. If you're trying to get to 3% body fat, then you probably shouldn't.
Right.
But
Yeah.
if you're you've got 100 extra pounds on a 5'4" frame, then maybe that is the one to get you back down to kind of reset. And as you're doing that, you're starting to develop the exercise habits and the nutrition habits and the mental health practices, so that once you get to that healthy weight, you can come off and hopefully sustain after that.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. And I know a couple people on Ozempic, but they're not trying to lose, like, they need to lose weight, but they're not trying to lose hundreds of pounds. But much like you talked about, like, they're just the Ozempic's doing all the work. Like, I don't necessarily know if they're always changing their eating habits. I can tell you, I know most of their exercise habits don't normally change a whole lot. So it's like the free ride, so to speak. It's so it's tough. One thing I don't like about my time this is probably about 15 years ago, my time working with bariatric surgery patients, is that I think the nutrition counseling was hard because these people went from eating nothing to being on a strict no carb, pretty much keto diet, right? Of high fat, high protein, stuff like that. And then they start introducing carbs back. So we're, in my mind, you're talking about 3 different diets, like in a relatively, let's say, in a 6-month span, right? Of eating anything to eating nothing strict. And then we're like, okay, now we're going to teach you go. So I think psychologically that has to be tough. I know it'd be tough on me, right? And I'm in shape to go from this diet to that diet to this diet. The only type of people I know that normally do that are someone that's getting paid for how they look, on a stage, but there's a difference in that they're getting paid to do it, right? Versus someone that's like doing it for other reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. I had something I was going to say. Let me just get my tiny brain to recall what I was about to say then. That was it. Well, I think the other thing that we have to be mindful of, and again, Johan Hari gives an example in this book. He talked about, actually, it was in one of his other books. There was a weight loss study. They did just IV nutrition, and they had this one woman who was an absolute rock star of the study, lost the most weight of everyone. And then one day she just disappeared, fell off the wagon. And, they found her and she started eating again, put on a bunch of weight. And one of the members of the study had kind of taken the time to actually sit down with her and have a conversation. Okay, let's see if we can unpack, what happened, what went wrong. And he got to the point where he was talking about, her early life. And he said, well, how old were you when you remember eating the way you eat now? And she said, I think it was like 10. And he said, was there anything that happened that was significant in your life around that age? And she said, yeah, that's when my grandfather started sexually abusing me. And so what they realized is, as this woman lost weight, she started, gleaning the attention of men again. And she didn't like it. It was a negative in her psychology. So the thing that bariatric and Ozempic isn't addressing is what was that underlying psychological element when it came to the weight gain. And so if you're not simultaneously addressing, some of the issues that obviously you've stuffed down and you're filling that void with food, then you are going to start eating again, and you are going to reverse your bariatric or the the weight loss that you got from Ozempic, and now you're going to be diving back in again and probably getting even worse.
Yeah, no, that, like I said, when I was there, we were doing, before you even had the surgery, you had to go through a psychological eval. And what that entailed, I don't know. Obviously, they wouldn't tell you, but I just know, like, you had to go through one, and you had to be approved to go through. But I didn't, unfortunately, I don't remember too many people being told no, and I couldn't tell you whether there was a follow-up as far as the psych eval for it after, like you said, in your example, right? If someone like that came through, did they do it, then do the bariatric surgery, and then did they continuously have psychological follow-ups to make sure that they're really getting at the root of the issue as far as why they're eating? So I don't know, but I think that is a telltale sign of a lot of issues, right? Food is comfort. Let's be honest, right? Food's comfort. So, if you're feeling bad, or or whatnot, you'll tend to go to the cupboard to eat to make yourself feel a little better and stuff. And then eventually it goes the opposite way, right? Where now food is starting to make you feel bad, right? Both mentally and physically, how you move, how you look and stuff like that. And it's just a vicious cycle.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny because it mirrors the fire service as well. The psych test that I was given, all four departments, is called the MMPI, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Interview. And as I started getting deeper into this and, critically thinking more because I'm learning from all these guests, I started asking the psychologists, psychiatrists about this test and said, hey, this is what we're given. And hands down, every single one has said, well, that was never meant to be a standalone test. Definitely not to define, someone's ability to be a first responder. So even when we are given tests, like you said, it may appear like it's, official, doesn't mean it's actually doing anything. And in this case, that really isn't, learning about that person and discovering if they have the ability to do this job. And then you're talking about ongoing, in a bariatric setting, it's the same with us. You do one at the front door and that's it. Congratulations, you're in. Good luck. You're not talking about what you brought into the job, not allowing you to unpack as you go through the job. So there is a similarity, that box checking version of psychology versus actually trying to heal the person.
Yeah, no, it is like now you made me think whether or not, and I don't know, like, does every professional firefighting department, do they do exit clinical evals?
Oh no, I've never heard of one doing that.
So that's why I was just curious. I was like, I know of none that do it. So, like, oh, we're gonna put all these programs in place and whether or not, but once soon as you put your papers in, best of luck. So that's unfortunate. When you really look at it, like, that made me think about that. So,
well, I've always said this, on the show, like, we don't have a VA. And so when you see numbers of, supposed line of duty deaths or fatalities, they're truly the tip of the iceberg, because the moment you walk out that back door for the last time, you cease to be a statistic. Like, if I dropped dead today, I wouldn't appear, on a firefighter death. So we're missing this, the magnitude of the issue by exactly what you're talking about, just casting people off and being, all right, good luck with all your physical injuries and your mental injuries, and you're not our problem anymore, versus the military side, where it may not be a perfect system, but at least it's set up to continue to care for our veterans.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, right? You've talked to us about the schedule change and everything. Like, you are just wrecking your bodies. Interesting. They did the numbers on our department, and if you work a full career, in comparison to the police officers, like, you're going to work 12 more years in total time, and comparatively, if you put over a 30-year career in, right? So, you worked an extra 12 years. Hey, best of luck. Here's your paper. Thanks for your 30 years of service, right? It's on you now to take care of yourself, right? And that's unfortunate. Yeah, there's some heart and lung bills in there, but, like, outside of that, like, it's not like you have the VA where you can go to or anything like that. It's like, I hope you learn something and to take care of yourself from people like myself and stuff. But it's challenging. I will say this: our department, we invite our retirees to come back and partake in exercise sessions and stuff like that. And me and another gentleman here, Mike, he's here to help too. So we'll answer any questions that we can have and give you support and what we think you should probably go about doing and whatnot. So we're trying to be on the forefront on that. But in terms of big health, knees, hips, backs, all that, no. But yeah, it's unfortunate.
Well, even this is what people don't understand. If FD works 12 years more than PD, people will understand that that's for the same salary too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We always, bid, we're trying to stay with PD. Like, yeah, but you work 16, 18 hours more than police does, depending on, what and that's without mandatory overtime. So, this is the big kind of smoke and mirrors. And it wasn't originally from malice, but we've really got to take a step back and go, but why? Why do these guys that have an even broader skill set than a law enforcement officer, because we do the fire and the EMS simultaneously, why are they working 12 years more than a police officer in the same department?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, when departments want to talk about, or cities want to talk about parity, right? Is it real parity, or are we just talking about a monetary number that's parity? Because if we're talking about true work, one guy's away from home a lot more than the other individual, so it's very interesting. As you know, we're working through the numbers right now in our department and stuff, and it's very eye-opening, to understand. I've heard people say that, just in our community and whatnot, be like, what, you guys work, wait, you're at the fire station all day, all night, 24 hours? I'm like, yeah, they don't go home after 8 hours like I do. They're there all night and stuff like that. So it's interesting, right? Especially when you get into like sleep deprivation and all that, and like they're like, oh well, he might get up once. I'm like, no, they're getting up on average of 5 times, maybe a night. Like, how much sleep are you getting up? I wake you up 5 times throughout the night, because it's not going to be, oh, I get called at midnight, I get called at 12:15, 12:30. It's not that. It's stretched out from 12 to 7, and it's just rough on their bodies. So I hope we see this push nationwide into changing the schedule for these guys. So, after they've gave all this time and effort and loyalty to the community, that they get to reap some benefits on the back end, when they go and retire and everything like that. So it's interesting. I think as more departments throughout the country go to this, you'll see it open up a little bit more. And I think it will make people more aware of what these individuals in these fire departments are doing, other than putting out fires and saving people's lives, right? Like, there's aspects to all that on their own end, be it, sleep deprivation to the mental health aspects. So.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I want to get to that in a little bit. Before we do, though, let's kind of get to your journey. You were dealing with, that sounds terrible. You were treating bariatric patients. I take that back. What was the road to training a tactical athlete, and then how did that ultimately bring you to Virginia Beach Fire and Police?
So the truth is, I kind of got lucky. So I was working with bariatric patients through the company I worked for at the time, and I had a boss that had previously came from Exos, and he decided to transfer me to a different facility because he thought I just had a better skill set than what I was being used for, so to speak. So he ended up transferring me to the Boo Williams complex in Hampton, which is a very ripe AAU program. Anyone ever listens to this, they probably know Allen Iverson or something like that. So people like that, Alonzo Mourning, all came through the system. So I went to their facility to train out of. And during that time, they were trying to grow the business. And one of the things that came up was, hey, why don't we try to get into the first responder area? So we had reached out to City Hampton, and we're like, hey, we'd like to run a pilot program free of charge. We'd like to run your organized training for your police academy, and then maybe it would come up with something more. So we did it for 1 year. They found very positive results in the fact that their injury rates went down during the academy, because it was a structured class. So it started that, and then it expanded out to, we'd have RDs come in and talk to these guys about not only how to pack lunches for an academy, right? Because an academy, you're going to be there 8 hours a day, and you're going to come in at 6 and leaving at 4. To, all right, now you're in the streets, right? You don't always get to have all the time you want, right? So you're gonna have to pack snacks. So it was an educational process through this whole thing. So it's very similar on the PT or on the physical side of it, right? We trained you to get through the academy, but with an understanding of, here's the same movement patterns you can do to help you in your career, right? You're wearing a vest, you're gonna be sitting there, hips are gonna get tight, back's gonna get tight, vest is gonna affect your shoulder range of motion. So it was a lot of education as well as we went through it. And we kept all kinds of stats on injuries and performance and stuff like that, and turned it into their brass. And it ended up becoming a contract for well over the 10 years that I was there. And then they continued on when I left. So, yeah, so that's what got me to kind of to Virginia Beach. And then what a small little snippet in there is, I left the Boo Williams facility and became a manager of multi-facilities at that point. And the one facility that I was at, there was firemen coming into there, and they talked about the position to being open. To be honest with you, the first time it came open, I did not apply. My other friend who works with Exos, he works with the Players Association there. He was like, he got offered the position, didn't want to move from Arizona in the end, turned it down. He's like, you should apply. So I did apply. I got lucky enough. I got the job. And then since there, it's been all uphill in a good way of learning the fire service just in general. But yeah, I've loved my time here. It's been great. As I told you when we talked before, I might be a strength coach here in the fire service, but they have allowed me to go through a fire academy. So I am now a certified firefighter in the state of Virginia. My girls like to say I'm a firefighter. I tell everybody I'm a paper firefighter. If this building catches on fire, I'm the first one out the door. I can tell you that right now. So where I think the benefit of that is, right, and we touched on it earlier, right, in the smaller community thing, is that I think going through a fire academy, right, or a police academy, or indulging yourself in that, or even you see this a lot of times guys in military training, right? You need some sweat equity if you want guys to buy into what you're saying, right? So I've gone outside, I've been in a burn building, I've gone through the same recruit schools, did all that. I understand what it takes to be a recruit in the Virginia Beach Fire Department and what it takes to get through it. I know what it's like on the civilian side of it, in the fact that I had to go home at night when my daughter's like 2 years old. I had to sit and I had to read the textbook so I could pass the state test, pass the test that goes on. So I really understand that. And when I get up in front of these recruits, here in a couple of weeks when we have another one come in, I'll be able to tell them, listen, I understand what you're about ready to go through. I understand what it takes on the family side and whatever not. So I think that creates buy-in. They trust me to help them, and then it helps. Like when they go out to the field, they're willing to come back and ask us questions because they understand that we know what they're kind of going through. Now, I don't know what it's like to be on scene and see a dead body or a limb laying over there, and I don't pretend to be like that. But outside of that, it helps them to come back and be like, this guy understands probably the physical pain that I'm in because I've been wearing this gear for 18 years and it's been wearing me down and everything like that. So I think that's helped a lot. So I digress and I'll let you ask your next question.
No, it's just brilliant. One of the things that's always intriguing when someone comes from another area of strength and conditioning to, the first responder profession specifically is maybe some of the myths that were busted or some of the challenges that they didn't realize they were going to face when they started working with our community. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, that's actually a good one. I was kind of a little worried to go to the fire service coming out of the sports performance. Like what, like not knowing anything. I was like, well, what do they do? I was like, I had the picture of the volunteer fire department at the bottom of my street. Right, these guys are sitting on the front of the truck drinking coffee or drinking soda, whatever. I'm like, you don't have to be in shape to be to fight a fire, right? Then I got here and I realized there's a huge difference. All right, climbing to the top of a 36-story building that we have in Virginia Beach here in full turnout kit and stuff like that is much different than I expected it to feel like. I'll be dead honest with you, like. The boots are heavy, helmet's heavy. The gloves, you can't grab stuff like you normally would wearing fire gloves. So there's a lot of things that kind of changed my mind about the fire service in general. And what I like to do is we have a huge internship program here, and our interns come on, and they have very much the same approach that I did. Like, oh, what's this, right? And then you get to put them in turnout gear, and then you get to understand how hot it is, how heavy it is. And it's an eye-opening when they come out and they're like, yeah, that's hard. I was like, yeah, now imagine having to do that on deprived sleep, right? And then have to go home and be the best dad in the world that you can possibly be to your kids and your family and your wife. I was like, and then come back in the next day, oh, by the way, and do it again. And now you might run into a call where unfortunately the little kid looks like the same little kid that you go home to every night, right? I was like, there's just a myriad of things that are just going to come down the pipeline at you that you're going to, unfortunately, block it all out. Why? Because the tax-paying civilian expects you to, unfortunately, because they don't think about that. All they think about when they call 911, that someone's going to show up and be their hero and take care of all their problems at that time, right?
Absolutely. So let's start at the very beginning. We'll kind of work through, someone even applying for a fire department, and then we'll talk about, probation and all the way through. So at the front door, Talk to me about the importance of, whatever kind of physical tests that you have to ensure that you've got the right fitness level, but also beginning the journey to injury prevention as well.
Yeah. So with our department, we start and we run CPAT, and I think it's a good starting point for anyone that want to get into the fire service. So if you're listening and you want to get in the fire service, at least Google or go on YouTube and find out what CPAT is, so you get a better understanding of it. Um, I joke with people that come in that this isn't like any television show you've seen, right? It's not simple, right? If you get through CPAT, I'm like, congratulations, you passed the bare minimum standard that we have in the fire service. So from there, what we have done to help attrition rates and to help people get in better shape, as we've talked about, is we have an 8-week prep academy. So once you get through, the CPAT and your offers and everything like that, and they come out, we then email out every single person that's on our hiring list. And right now, I want to say it's 50 people, and we invite you to come to a voluntary prep academy. I know some cities do the same thing, but they make it mandatory, but we do it voluntary. So what you're going to do is you're going to spend an hour at 8 a.m., just like you will for the next 7 months. Once you enter our academy, you're going to spend an hour with me, and you're going to PT. And we kind of use that as a little bit of a buffering point to find out how this group is going to be come day one, right? So we spend an hour PT, and then after that, you're going to go, and we like to use some captains that have been down in the training center before, and what they're going to do is they're going to give you a low-level dose of what fire school is like, right? They're going to put you in some turnout gear. They're going to induce you 1 week maybe to some confined space, and then the next week it's going to build, and it's going to go to ladders, into hose streams, into mayday, into search, But what we have found is individuals that come in and they get through the system all the way to that point, they will get an eye opener real quick of how much physicality there is just in 4 hours of fire school and the expectations, and we make it known, like, right now, this is all friendly, right? This is all calm talk, right? But come day one of fire academy, there's an expectation from the fire service of as in this department, and the citizens of Virginia Beach, of what they expect of our firefighters, right? And if you're not willing to meet that, our standard and the city standard of the citizens, that maybe this isn't for you, right? At this point in time, it's nothing wrong with saying, I'm not in shape to do this, right? I'm not ready to commit into this. Let me go get my things in order and I can apply again next year, right? There is nothing wrong with that in my mind. I just think people need to come in here with the expectation that, this isn't easy, right? This isn't for everyone, and it's tough.
I love the way that you've made that voluntary, because that requires some skin in the game by an individual for a start. Secondly, there's kind of like a spectrum of programs out there. I always give massive props to Ocala Marion here. Chris Hickman, my friend, started it up. They have a mentorship program because there are underserved communities in areas. And it might just be that no one in their area is even talking about being a firefighter. Maybe they don't really see themselves in some of these departments, culturally. And so I love the fact that you enable it. You put a lighthouse up. You say, if you just show up, we will give you training. We'll put you in gear. We'll prepare you for an academy. There's scholarships. Because what that does is it empowers kids to try. Some of them end up thriving and becoming incredible firefighters. Some of them, as you said, maybe need to go back and do some work, evaluate what they really want to do. And some of them go, oh, hell no, this is definitely what I do not want to do. All of those are a win. And so that kind of prep, exactly what you're talking about, has an absolutely essential place. Where I think it's sad is when you see, these long CPAP preps, and they fail again. Oh, you can just do more and more. We'll help you. There has to be a point where you're like, you just aren't the right kind of person right now. Like you said, doesn't mean that you won't be one day. But right now, we can't keep lowering the bar or holding your hand. There's got to be an ownership level too. So you can't exclude people by having no mentorship or no on-ramp. But at the same time, where do you draw that line where it's like, just like you said, okay, you're not meeting the bar at the moment. Thank you for trying. We'll be here if you want to try again.
Yeah, no, I've had discussions with chiefs. Like, I would say you can teach anyone to be a fireman. right? Like I can teach you the skill sets to be a fireman. However, you need to show up day one with the capability or capacity to do that. And that is where we have some issues. Now, the city here, they have a cadet program where they work with the local technical part of the high school. Like, so they have an entry program there as well and stuff. But still, I think it's tough. Like, no, we do not need to keep bringing the bar down so we can get more numbers, of all around through the door. I think it's tough, but I like kind of where we're at. Like me personally, because I'm a fitness guy, I would like the entry exam to be harder, right? Just because I still see attrition in the academy of like the physical strains to first 3 weeks or 2 weeks of an academy. Guys are like, oh, I'm just beat up. I'm like beat up. I'm like, we're doing body weight stuff. Like we haven't even put you under load yet, right? Which, by the way, you're going to be 85 pounds under load every day when we hit fire school, right? And you're not going to take off your bunker pants and boots and all that while we're in between sets and reps, right? You're going to still be wearing some of that stuff. So I don't know. Like it's tough, but I just wish we could find a way to get the information out there of the true expectation. Now, maybe it is out there, and the people that are wanting to do it aren't going to the right resources.
I'll put it squarely on our shoulders. I think the fire service has done a terrible job of educating the public on what we actually do. I really do. From obviously the EMS side. I mean, most municipal areas, have been doing EMS for like 50 years now, and you still get people saying, "Why is there a fire engine? It's a medical call." There's just a complete, lack of understanding. And then, like you said, with the physical side, with that bar coming down. I mean, I just saw on my Facebook memories, it was 6 years ago now, so I was 45. But I was getting ready to just have my ducks in a row in case I needed to go back to the fire service for the fifth time after I left to do this full time. And so, being humble enough to be like, well, I don't know. Let's find out. Let me test myself. I did the CPAT and it was 7 minutes, 20 seconds. And I don't say that to brag. I've never been the best at anything ever, but it's just at 45 years old, if my skinny ass can do a 720 CPAT, then scraping through or trying to get 1020 for the third time, there's that bar. And if you look at the departments that set the bar high, they're the ones that get the right candidates. But the last place I worked, they vehemently opposed any sort of fitness standard. Next to my fire station was a 30-story high-rise hotel. Now, 100 pounds of the high-rise strip, the things I would need to fight fire on the 30th floor is 100 pounds of gear on my, what was 168-pound body. So, 60% of my body weight. And then you're climbing 30 stories, and then you go to work. So it's not people making up some crazy faux physical, gauntlet for no reason. It's needed because on our worst day, we are expected to do something that, is of elite athleticism. Doesn't mean that we're the fastest, strongest, whatever. But like you said, that mental toughness and that teamwork. If there's a floor full of people about to burn up on the 30th floor, we are the only chance they have. And if, 4 of us tap out on the 10th floor, now they become the victim, and we've got to then take care of them rather than the people that are burning on the 30th. So these fitness standards absolutely have a place. And just like you said, our fire academy is labeled minimum standards. And I say this over again. That tells you this is the shittest you should be your entire career. So then to turn around after 5-10 years and say it's not fair that we need, you're saying we need fitness standards. Well, you're ignoring what you went through to the front door of the fire service in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I think everything we should do fitness wise, and this is my belief, especially when it comes to testing, it should be under load constantly, right? I read a lot of Rob Orr's research and stuff like that. He's great when it comes to load carriage and stuff like that. But it's important to know that effect that it's going to have on your body and stuff like that. We can go back to CPAT. Normally, what happens is you put people on a step mill right off the bat under load, and they crumble, right? Because I'm like, we don't fight fire in gym shorts and cut off T-shirts, all right? So I think that's a large eye-opening thing to people. And then, as you said, CPAT, like you're running with a uncharged hose. Like let's be honest, like the hardest part about a hose line is when it's charged and you're taking it upstairs, right? And that's firefighting. It's not hauling empty hoses around. So I think it's good because I jokingly say this, and I jokingly say this to my police officers as well, because unfortunately here they just started having a fitness. I said the only difference between us and you guys is our CPAC gets the sludge off the bottom of the barrel. Like we don't get those guys because CPAC eliminates that. However, if we had nothing, that would still be in the running of our process, and that most likely is going to be what I call non-productive stats. Those people are going to be injured. They're going to be on light duty a lot of the time, or calling out sick, right? And that's not what the citizens of Virginia Beach pay for.
I had a police officer on the show who does background checks now. And he was talking about a story where he was in a conference and someone else was speaking. And they were talking, again, I think about the dollar amount of certain areas when it comes to recruitment and retention. And he asked this speaker, how much does it cost to get rid of a bad employee, someone that you ultimately probably should never have hired? And the guy said $500,000. So when we're talking about, well, how do we afford a D shift, for example, 24/72, that's just one of many, many columns of, downstream money that you can pull from. If you have that person who, really had never met the original standard before it was brought down, and now that becomes a repeated, injury issue. And I kept myself in great shape. I still had meniscus tears on both knees and a back injury. And that was, with diligence and yoga and strength and conditioning and chiropractic and everything else. So we got to think about that as well. There seems to be this kind of complete denial of, proactive funding, and we just lean into this false economy of, what's good for a budget year, but that doesn't work in business and it doesn't work in the first responder professions either.
Yeah, no, you're right. I joke. I'm like, listen, if the fire service most years was a privatized entity, we'd be broke and bankrupt in probably like 2 years, right? But that's not the world that we live in. But you're right though. When we were looking at staffing matrix and everything, when you were looking at leave time and stuff like that, the biggest killer to our staffing matrix is light duty, right? Because those are the ones that you can't plan for, right? In a budget, you can plan for annual leave and sick leave, but you can't plan for someone to go on like 4, 5, 6 people on a shift to go on light duty. And so those are callbacks, and now that starts to wear at the system. We used to discuss it with us when we met with you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we talked about the front door and the entrance standards. What kind of strength conditioning and screening are you giving these new recruits once they get hired?
Yeah, so we try to be very proactive on that. So what we do is obviously from its general side, they do an OC health screening, come through that. Then we do a lot of force plate testing at our department, right? So we want to see how not only do you put out load, but how do you absorb load, right? Because we talked about carrying gear. If you're not good at absorbing load, I've seen injuries happen, guys jumping off the truck, stuff like that. So you need to learn to absorb load. We use it also on the shoulders to figure out if you have discrepancies on internal and external rotation of the shoulder. So that's one of the things that we've added in. We recently just purchased a DEXA machine too. So we used to use a Bob pod to do body comp for people, but we're switching gears and we're going to a higher level. We want to figure out what kind of visceral fat individuals we have. We pulled some data in our department on individuals, on their MET scores, on their body comp and whatnot, and we extrapolated that out over 5 years, and we looked at individuals in our department that also had some form of medical event, and most of the medical events were cardiovascular in nature. And what we found was in our data now was that the majority of those people that had those events 2 to 3 years prior out, they had a spike in body comp and fat rather. So what we want to do is we want to get ahead of that and maybe figure out like, hey, is there also an uptick in visceral fat, or is it just overall fat? And then we can also use it for a myriad of other things, such as like guys recovering from injury, like are they having good balance in their musculature? And then our females in the department as well, like, we can do bone density scannings with it and stuff like that. So we're trying to be very proactive and stay ahead of the curve on everything that we're trying to do. But I think those are our big brass tacks ones. We do still do a little bit of the NFPA testing, but not as much. Really, we just stick to the METS testing. We want to kind of find our own parameters. And then as well, real quick, with the force plates, we can kind of use that data a little bit with our recruits and kind of figure out like, hey, are we beating them up a little bit too much, right? Because there's some responsibility on our end to get an understanding of what our athletes are kind of going through, and maybe we need to tailor it back because yesterday was a tough day out in the field, and maybe we tailor it back. It's our job to keep them healthy as well. So
that's another kind of misnomer that I was raised with. All the milk commercials that makes your bones strong. And we now know that exercise makes your bones strong. That's it,
yeah.
And
yeah.
sleep again. So yeah, I mean, getting that misinformation, especially with the postmenopausal female firefighters, I can see that would be something you have to think about.
Yeah, and I in my experience with firefighters, I'll ask them like, "Do you have a primary, a PCP?" And they're like, "No, I go to the health doctor once a year." I'm like, "Hey, man," I was like, "That's all well and good, but I'm like, you should probably have a primary." So I think it's good that we're taking these extra steps and whatnot. We've actually switched up this coming year. We will actually be using a company outside to do all our blood draws, our physicals, and stuff like that. However, we will still be doing the force plates and all that. And because we have an outside company coming in and doing our physicals as well, what we will do is we're going to actually add in a work performance exam with all our firefighters, where we'll put you in turnout gear and you'll do a myriad of tests, dragging hoses, dragging dummies, climbing stairs, completely non-punitive, but we want to do some time and kind of figure out how everyone in the department's doing and find out whether or not, we're doing the right stuff in our department to make sure everyone's healthy and they can do their job, not only just do it, but can they do it efficiently, right? And can they make sure if they do it, right? And let's say they do the work performance. Then if we gave you 5 minutes, could you do it again? Because in the real world, you might have to, right? We don't need you just to be able to do it one time, right? If you're going to be at the station for 24 hours, you might have to do it 4 or 5 times, unfortunately, right? So that's some of the stuff that we're trying to figure out on our end. We're trying to push the needle forward, and we're always trying to find what other departments are doing, and that's why podcasts like yourself here are great, because we can listen to what other people are trying to push through in their initiatives.
That's what's interesting with creating an annual fitness test. I mean, ideally, punitive or forging such a culture that you don't even need it to be punitive anymore. It's just a culture of fitness. When you think about law enforcement, some of these other agencies, you can see how maybe it'll be a little bit harder to put something together. But, our implements don't care if you're, 18 or 55, black, white, gay, straight, male, female, whatever the thing is. And so this is whether it's the CPAT or the fire sled test or whatever, a work-related circuit, no one can say it's not fair, unless you make it some ridiculous scenario that, it's 24-hour hose drag or something.
Yeah.
But, so then no one can say it's not fair. So this is what I always, kind of struggle with. Either you get it's not fair, or you get the strength and conditioning guru is like, all right, we're going to do, max jump and then max deadlift, and like, well, time out. That doesn't apply either. Let's just do the same kind of movements that we did in the academy. Take some hose upstairs, some weight, move a hose, move a dummy, carry a ladder, throw it, whatever the basic tools are, because that's it. I mean, if you can do that and you show aerobic capacity on, I think the stair mill is the best thing. All right, then overall, it looks like you're still doing well and we're still staying on track. So the opposition to an annual fitness standard, I find just maddening, because firstly, the ability to do the job, to get to that 30th floor with 100 pounds of gear and facilitate that rescue is imperative. But in the same breath, you're also forging longevity in your employees when you hold them to a fitness standard.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. And I think your fitness changes when you're in gear. I can tell you, in our programming for our academy, every Friday, we put you in gear one way or another. So it could be, so let me back up real quick. So in our academy, normally you're going to start off with EMT school, right? And then you're going to go through EMT school, and then you're going to go to fire school for the last half of it. But even when you're in EMT school, that very first Friday, we put you in turnout gear and we make you crawl around. We make you do air squats. We make you do whatever, right? And every single Friday, we call it combat PT. you're going to do something. And then eventually what happens is you're going to mitigate to out back up to the burn building, to the props. And then you're going to be asked to carry stuff, drag hoses and what. But every single week during the academy, you're going to be wearing turnout gear and stuff like that. So you come back to the incumbent side. Every single week, shouldn't you be putting on your gear and doing some form of training to make sure that your fitness level is up? Yes, but do they? Probably not.
Yeah. Well, the problem we got now, and it's a valid one, is not only the carcinogens if you haven't got a good decon program, but now you've got these PFAS in the gear as well, which is just adding to that perfect storm of carcinogens. So getting down the road at least, either a PT set of fire gear that's not fire resistant but mimics the heat, or getting ideally PFAS free gear where now you can safely PT. Because I get the argument for and against, but you can't be a structural firefighter and not spend time suffering in your gear. It's just otherwise you're going to get to a fire and you're going to fall apart.
Yeah. It changes a lot too, like your VO2 changes and everything. So, and if we're worried about people, like you said, falling apart, falling out, whatever, on fire ground, then you might want to be accustomed to what you're getting into.
So we've talked about, some of the kind of methods of training as far as gear and that kind of thing. What about principles? What are the movements that you like, the training philosophies to start building the aerobic endurance and the strength capacity of these first responders that you're working with?
Yeah, so I'll speak heavily on the recruit side of things. So we spend about 4 weeks in a GPP phase, and normally it's totally unloaded, and it's a lot of body weight exercise, body weight movements. We want to see how these guys can move, right? Does the majority of class have shoulder range of motion issues, or can they squat properly? So we spend about 4 weeks just doing unloaded stuff. Every Wednesday, we like to get out and take field trips. So we go running around the city, so to speak, or we'll go to the beach or something and do different stuff. And then probably after about 4 weeks, we start to educate our individuals on barbells, right? On different barbell movements that's going to be expected of them. Because you have some people come in, they've never touched a barbell, right? They've never touched a kettlebell, dumbbell, whatever. So we want to see what these guys look like, right? Using an unloaded barbell and what kind of movement patterns they have. So then what we can do is better look at our groups, right? And try to put like people together a little bit. And then what happens is when we first get into weight training, right, we are able to put better eyes on individuals that might need more help. Our training staff helped us, but when me and Mike have a class of 50 or 60 people, it's hard to watch everyone, right? And safety is our first thing. So we try to use that. And then if we have any individuals in our academy that have training experience, right, and after we've seen a little bit, we'll let them help out, just keep eyes for safety. But so after we go through our barbell stuff, we use a little bit of Cal Dietz's triphasic methodology. And like our first 2 weeks, we do a lot of eccentrically focused compound lifting. And the reason is because we want to see how you can absorb load, because you're going to be put under load, right? So we want to see if you can absorb load. And normally about after 2 weeks of that, then we go into a more stabilization. So we'll go into quick movements into isometric holds for extended period of times, because, well, in fire ground, you're going to be asked to hold stuff under load. Could be a hose, could be a ladder. So we want to see if you can absorb load and can you stabilize load. If you can do those two things, then I know you can produce force. So normally what happens after those 2 weeks, then we go into your more traditional contractile movements, through full range of motions and stuff like that. And we get more into your power and explosion. And we run through that whole myriad. And then probably about 2 weeks before going out to fire school, we start to unload you and just start to work a more traditional power and speed and all that stuff. So we kind of follow that mentality. But what allows is our guys to do is I jokingly say this, before they're getting ready to get their teeth kicked in fire school, that it allows their body to kind of recoup for 2 weeks. So we've beat you up, we've gotten you stronger, we've gotten you used to absorbing load and stabilizing your load and being able to pick heavy stuff up and move it, because people aren't getting smaller nowadays. So we get to that point, and then what happens is, okay, we're going to unload you and we're going to try to get you moving around, moving fast and stuff like that. So then when you hit fire school, you should be refreshed and ready to go.
Talk to me about rest and recovery. So before they even go on shift, what advice are you giving these young recruits so they can recover as much as possible for the next day?
Yeah, so we do sleep lectures and make them understand like what different sleep cycles look like and how to understand, your drowsiness and much like we've talked before is that a lot of times these young recruits don't like they're young and they're able to go, right? The battery stays charged, I jokingly say longer. But the problem is if you go out to your first shift at your first station and you're up, half the night, and then you're excited and you're amped, and then you go home and you want to tell your family about it, right? Just know like you might only have 24 hours where you got to rinse and repeat that whole cycle again. So it's tough. So you need to go home, make sure you get your stuff together, right? Get your stuff packed up and try to get in bed early enough because you need to come back in the next morning and replace the next guy. But I think a lot of times these guys don't understand the wear and tear it takes on their body. But we try to educate them that. And I'm as Chief. I know you talked to Chief. Has he explained our schedule to you at all?
Um, I think he has, but certainly not. We haven't heard it on here. I don't think so. Let's unpack it.
Yeah, so it's crazy. It's a 21-day cycle, and then that first week, it's pretty much you're on, you're off, you're on, you're off, you're on, you're off, you're on, you're off, and then you're off for 3 days, and you're on, you're off, you're on. I'm messing this up probably a little bit, but you guys conceptually get this, right? And then you're off for 2 days, then you're on, you're off. It's roughly something like that. But as you can see, that first week, right? They call it Hell Week. You're getting your head kicked in, right? So you're up a lot at night, and you're asked to go home and rinse and recover and stuff like that. So what we try to tell our individuals, during Hell Week, you're probably not going to get good quality sleep, unfortunately, right? However, when you hit your 2 days off, or your 3 days off, or your 5 day off, it is imperative that you take some time out of your own schedule and get recovered, get good quality sleep. Maybe not go out with your friends. Definitely try to stay away from drinking alcohol because we know already alcohol destroys our whole sleep cycles. But that again is tough because unfortunately, I joke with people in the fire station, like, what do the firemen like to do? Like all our social events are usually involving alcohol, right? So we got to get ahead of that. But to get back to your question, yeah, we just do a lot of education and we try to explain to them like the downfalls of not sleeping, right? And how it's going to affect you. And we educate them on caffeine and adenosine and all that. So yeah, I think it's tough because when you get out to the station, you're trying to keep up with the senior guy, right? And you still want to go home and you want to go hang out with your buddies that are your age. So I think it can be very tough.
Absolutely. Well, we mentioned mutual friend Melissa from Team Builder. Yeah. So you've talked about 50 recruits, for example, in the class, and you've got all the people that are already, on the floor, as it were. Talk to me about the applications as far as Team Builder with your department, and then what are some of the areas that you love about it?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing I say we really have gotten from Team Builder is the fact that we create surveys for all our recruits in the morning, and these surveys ask them to put down the amount of sleep they got, what their body weight is, what their urine color is, their respiratory rate, their heart rate, their blood pressure, what's their subjective stress level, just a myriad of things. But it's really fast and efficient. They can do it on their phone. But the one good thing about that is we get a better idea of truly how their health is, right? And then when it comes to NFPA standards, are they falling within NFPA guidelines to be able to do training, right off the bat? Are these guys coming in hydrated, right? And if they're not coming in hydrated, then it's on me and Mike to make sure, hey, we're going to make sure you're hydrated before you go out to do burns or something like that. So that's the biggest onus that we've gotten from Team Builder as far as the recruit side. Now, we've been lucky enough to be able to take that data and give it to universities such as George Mason and Joel Martin's crew up there, and they've created some readiness studies out of it as well. Now, the other good point is we're a decent sized department. I can't get to everyone, and I can't get to every fire station in the city. So, good thing of the technology, everyone has a phone. We're able to write programs, being if you want to get in shape, or you're coming back from injuries. As we've talked before, we do a lot of return to work based off of what we get from doctors and their scripts and their indications and counterindications. So what we can do is we can say, okay, we see that you are 6 weeks out of surgery, your PT says you're able to do this, this, and this, but stay away from this. So we can able to then go and program it. So you can either do it at home or you can do it in the station. Every station that we have is outfitted with a rogue rack, rogue weights, kettlebells, rowers, treadmills. Crazy. We're pretty committed to the fitness side of things up here. So we're able to program things out for them as well. And the good thing about Team Builder, if they have an issue, they can always message us through it if they want to or whatnot. So yeah, Team Builder's been very good to us.
Are you able to see trends with all these surveys and all this data you're collecting? Are you able to see, for example, if you're implementing certain programs, like an overall improvement in areas?
Yeah, you can. So that's a good thing. We can track weight trends and stuff like that. So that's one thing we're pushing a little bit more for in this upcoming academy is to get a little bit better of having our guys actually track some of their compound lifts, so we get a better understanding of really if these guys are pushing themselves in that aspect. And when I come back to the survey, we have used it to consistently track weight gain and weight loss in the academy, or for the better part, weight loss. We've never really seen anyone gain weight in the academy. However, what really came from it is we were able to use that data and then go upstairs to our senior staff and be like, hey, listen, on average, these guys are losing 7 pounds, right? Not body fat, of fluid weight during their first week of the fire academy. So I think it'd be a good idea to maybe that we invest in an ORS, like a drip drop or liquid IV. You know what I'm saying? Like, so we've gotten good feedback from our department. Like, okay, well, do you have data? Well, yeah, here's data from the last 5 academies, so to speak. And this is why we should use it and whatnot. So we use it quite a bit to collect data. And I think that's the easiest part for us because guys can go on there, click it in, go there. They weigh in the morning. So that portability is a huge thing for us.
That's something I've heard quite a few people on the show mention is dehydration, the use of energy drinks, and the rhabdo that they're seeing in some of these recruit programs.
Yeah, we've had it, and it wasn't necessarily through a pure exercise standpoint. What happens is when they hit fire school, that's a whole nother level, right? And it's not cold here in Virginia Beach. So we've had to run some, during the summer, late fall and stuff. So guys will hit fire school and they'll come in and be just borderline enough to pass as far as what their body weight was the day before, right? So we know that most of that weight gain back is going to be fluid. So they'll come in, they'll be going through it and they're already beat up. And what we've had 2 or 3 cases where we've had to move people out in a box, ambulance, just so.
I'm not coughing. That's good.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thank you.
just to verify.
Yeah. So, we had to go seek better medical treatment, than what like EMTs here on site can treat, just because they're so severely dehydrated and whatnot. But, there's the other side to that. Like, we asked them, hey, do you feel all right? You're just borderline to where we like you to be as far as hydration. Yeah, I'm good to go. Well, we kind of got an idea it's probably going to happen. It doesn't always happen, but kind of idea that, yeah, most of these guys are going to end up being severely dehydrated and then they get shipped off. And we know what's going to happen, right? You're going to go to the ER. They're going to test you. You're going to come back, you're dehydrated. Your levels are up, and it's going to be, okay, we're going to hold you for 2 days and we're going to release you. Right. And it's because they've been working hard, right? There's pretty much in the middle of a high intensity workout, let's just say. Right. So everything's crazy. So yeah, there's definitely rhabdo cases. Like, we try to stay away from it as much as we can. We've gone to the point now where we give longer breaks. We got a slushy machine, that we make slushies and we give out, like, to help drop that core temperature, to help keep them colder as well. So yeah, we've tried to mitigate it a lot of ways. You can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink. That's what I've learned with recruits. We can educate the heck out of them, and you're still going to have some cases, unfortunately. I mean, you can have a great team. I mean, you see pro athletes. It still happens with pro athletes, unfortunately. So,
speaking of education, that was a good segue. One of the things that I've realized, certainly on the shift side, and get your take on the strength and conditioning side, On the shift side, there's very little research being done on firefighter shifts. And sadly, what I'm realizing is now there's a need for culturally competent researchers, not just people who are kind of on the outside looking in, but people, like you said, that have gone through a fire academy, have done the job, that really understand, okay, this is what it feels like to do a 24/48, or, the shift schedule that you guys do. And so you end up with these studies. They're very, very small studies. They're on one type of department, and then the whole country runs with it. And they end up, advocating for a worse schedule than they were in before, i.e. the 48/96. And it's very dangerous. It wasn't any fault of the researcher, but it shows that the same parallel, so many of our guys and girls that go to a mental health practitioner, and that person has never worked with one of us before, more often than not, it makes it worse, not better. It's the same thing with the research. So whether it's the shift sleep or whether it's just strength and conditioning, what are you seeing as far as the research world and the I guess the culturally competent element of truly understanding what we do in the research that you are reading and exposed to at the moment?
Yeah, research is always funny to me. I'm all about it. Our guys in our department would like to be involved with more research. Normally, though, they want it to either be sleep-based or performance-based, and I always link it back. It's all back to performance in the end, because they're linking their sleep to their performance, either in the fire station or how they're performing on their workouts or whatever not. So I think that's a big thing that would help the fire service if we were able to get a better understanding. That I think a lot of our guys, when they think research, right, they're thinking research on the athlete, and that's what they want to see. How will this research, right, better help me perform at my job or whatever we do? Like, and if it helps you perform better at your job, more than most likely it's going to have health benefits to you. That's what I'm going to guess on that one, right? So I think that's a good thing. Like I said, like I've worked with Joel Martin a little bit. I work extensively with Dr. Eric Ryan out of UNC, University of North Carolina, and their In Motion lab. Primarily right now we're working on slip, trips, and fall study. They'll be back up in 2 weeks to finish some stuff up. But he's just getting going in NIOSH and stuff like that. And we talk all the time about some different things that they can work on. I know one of his PhD students is going to work on, I'm going to mess this up a little bit, but it has to do with exercise fatigue on firefighters with cancer. So he's trying to go that route and just get a better understanding on like the different myriads of the fire service. But he's very committed to like anything and everything when it comes to the fire service and the physical well-being of it. So great crew there. But yeah, so I think if we want to get more research, well, I think people are willing to do it, especially if you get into the young guys, because the young guys have grown up more with the Whoops, the Auras, the iPhones, so they're used to looking at their metrics or whatever not. Versus, I think I found personally that older guys tend to be like, well, how are you going to use this against me? I'm like, no, we're not using this against you. You understand, like, research is used to help get funding, right? And funding can be for health metrics. It can be for a ton of stuff. And, so I think that's tough. But I do think if we were smart as a fire service, that we would dive wholeheartedly and get into the research. I believe some chiefs are apprehensive as well to get into it. I don't know why. Yeah, I mean, someone else is coming in and doing all the work, but they're going to work around your schedule, right? They're not going to be like, oh no, you can't go on that call. We have to do this blood pressure test right now, right? They're like, okay, we'll get it another day or another time. So, yeah. So I don't know. It's a great question, because I've never wondered. Sorry, not ever. I've always wondered why more departments don't get involved with research.
I think one of the biggest barriers that I see is that, because again, when you're asked for research in some areas, like, well, we don't need research for that. Like, for example, as I say all the time, that a 24/72 is going to be healthier than a 24/48. I mean, do we need to go to a lab for that? An extra 24-hour recovery period between shifts? Of course, it's going to benefit people.
Yeah.
But I think there's a fear that it's going to expose, all these things that do need to be fixed. And, you need more staffing and you need to have fitness standards. So there's action required. but the juice is worth the squeeze. When you really verify what we already know, and you set those standards, and you reverse issues that are preventing recruitment, and you fully staff your department, you're just going to be operating at a higher level, and you're going to have a healthier workforce. So, sadly, I think a lot of that resistance comes from fear. And even going back to the old guys with that minimum standards thing again, you as a firefighter, if you're scared of being asked to do your job, you're in the wrong job. It's just that simple. If you're scared of being tired, this is something one of my guests said recently about exercise. People are scared of being tired. And it's like, well, think about that. Do you want the guy that's scared of being tired in the passenger side of your police car or in the back of your fire engine? No, you don't. You want the person who got tired 2 days ago when they were working out and pushed themselves and is ready to climb that 30 stories with 100 pounds of gear on their back. So no matter how you look at it, the truth is there, and it's just, okay, you've really got to look in the mirror and go, am I truly wanting a solution, or am I really putting roadblocks to stop this research, these innovations from happening because I'm worried about my own journey? And I think most people, if they look in the mirror and evaluate, they're like, okay, I've kind of deviated from the initial thing, which was I want to help people. I need to get back on track. I don't think there's too many people in these positions that are really malicious or that uncaring, but we've definitely kind of slipped away from the mission, which is delivery of service and making sure everyone goes home, not just goes home, but goes home every day they were supposed to go home, rather than being forced to work all these extra shifts.
Yeah, I think you nailed the head with the fear thing. We've did gallery testing here for cancer, and I know not everyone did it. And I know one guy I talked to, he said, I just kind of fear the unknown. Like, if I don't know about it, I don't know about it. I'm like, well, wouldn't you want to know about it to get ahead? So I think you're right about the fear thing.
Absolutely. All right. Well, then a couple of quick areas before we go to some closing questions. Firstly, talk to me about the aging first responder, the aging tactical athlete. As I mentioned before, it doesn't matter how old you are. If you're on the ground doing the job, you still need to be able to do, what is required of you. Should you be a triathlete or a world champion power lifter? Of course not, but still be able to do the job. But as I also know, sitting here at 51 years old, you do get a little slower. Those injuries do add up. So what are you doing in your programming to try and foster resilience in the older firefighters in your department?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is, like, we want our guys to move, and that's what I kind of get with them, right? I'm like, find what you like to do, right? Like, yeah, we'll throw in some strength, like suggest some strength training, right? Because you still need it, but more importantly, I'd rather you just not come to work and just sit there all day, right? Get up, walk on the treadmill, do something. Like, is walking on the treadmill the best thing? No, but it beats sitting on the couch watching TV for 24 hours, right? So we like to have our guys get up and get moving. We've tried some different health classes as well to get people in. I think sometimes, not for excuses, but I think with our department, how spread out it is throughout the county, sometimes it's tough to get people to one central location. That's why Team Builder works so well with us. But yeah, it's working mobility, right? Getting these guys moving, and then getting them some strength training as well. Much like you spoke about yourself, a lot of these guys are beat up, lower backs hurt, right? So they don't want to be lifting heavy loads. They even, like we talked about, turnout gear, like they like to limit, unfortunately, how much they wear their turnout gear. But we got to keep them moving, right? And what I found the best approach is find out what bothers them, right? And how can we alleviate those aches and pains? If we can alleviate those aches and pains, then they start moving better, right? And then they want to try more things and new things. So that's kind of how I approach the aging firefighter. But I also think it's most importantly is to meet them halfway, right? I'm not going to go and be pushing on them because they're going to eject out of me, right? I want them to, like, hey, remember, we're here to help. And then they're like, hey, I have this thing in my back and my back's bothering me. All right, well, let's try these things right now, right? These stretches, whatever. Well, how's that feel? Yeah, it feels better. Okay, well, let's keep doing those, right? And then as you start feeling a little bit better, we'll add more and more. And that's kind of that trajectory of getting them comfortable with you and trusting you and getting them back moving again.
What I found on my personal journey, I'm not looking to lift more than I could 10 years ago or whatever it was, even though ironically in some areas I do now just because of efficiency and the training I've done. But it's less about adding more and more about addressing imbalances now. Because if I'm hinging properly and I'm able to do a deep squat and engage all the muscles that you should be using for a squat, I can lift the same or more just simply by addressing the things that are broken, addressing the things that are tight. And I'm not there yet by any means. So this is what I'm finding as I progress into like 40s, especially 50s now, is, shoulders and hips and ankles and knees and, neck, all those things. If I'm tuning them up, I've already done, decades of strength conditioning. That's still there in the bank. It's just now about helping my body move without pain, because, anyone that's had a rock in their shoe, it's so distracting. It doesn't want, you just don't want to walk. It's the same thing. If you can take the pain away, all of a sudden that negative element of the workout starts to go away. Now the red line workout's still going to suck, but enjoying moving again, just like we talked about with kids years ago, that's what we've got to refine, but if it's painful, then you move less and you get tighter, and it's just this vicious circle until you become that couch potato that has a heart attack in the middle of a fire ground.
100%. Yeah, it's I wish we could get everyone in their later years of the fire service to have that mentality and go forward. Unfortunately, a lot of times I hear, I've been doing it my whole career. I haven't ever worked out. And one thing I hear in my department is you can't strain fat. I'm just like, all right, like I don't necessarily have a comeback for that one yet, but I'm like, what are we talking about here? I'm like, yeah, but if you're fat, the probability of you dying at a younger age normally goes up. So I'm like, do you want to just retire and then that's it? Like, I don't know, when I retire, I want to go live a long, prosperous life as much as I possibly can. So maybe it's better off to stay moving.
If an ocean lifeguard doggy paddles towards your drowning child, they're still going to get there. They're still swimming, but is it the right way?
No doubt, right? Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy thought. So, but yeah, I'm lucky. I brag on the department I work for. I'm lucky. We are young and we have a very good culture of health and wellness and fitness, right? So I would say our majority of those individuals is relatively small, right? So a lot of my guys are in my ear on my email asking me for new equipment, bigger weights, like you name it, right? Hey, can we get this new piece of equipment? I'm like, no, unfortunately, we're a fire service, not a gym, right? But like I said, I'm lucky in my situation when it comes to stuff like that.
Brilliant. That's good to hear. All right. Well, the very last question before we go to the closing questions. Talk to me about physical therapy and bringing people back to work. Because as you mentioned, like when I live now in Ocala, it's Florida, a lot of retirees. Every time I've been to PT after a surgery or after a back injury, which I didn't have surgery, which was amazing. I'm alongside pensioners who have had, hip replacements and things like that. And so they're, fit for duty, if you like, fit for the retirement home is simply, can they stand up from the toilet? Mine is 100 pounds of gear, 30 floors up. So, they are great facilities. And the one I went to mainly, they were super humble and they would allow me to kind of throw things into the mix. So we got to that point where, okay, now I can, first call when I walk through the station door on my first day back, God forbid it's that one, we're ready for that. So talk to me about, this background as far as the physical therapy side and how you're able to foster that performance level from the person before they're signed off and walk back through the station door.
Yeah, I'm lucky. Obviously, I stated my wife's a physical therapist, and a company I work for, mainly doing bariatric surgeries, like that was based primarily out of multiple physical therapies places. So in the area here that I work, like I know a lot of physical therapists. So normally when I get paperwork from them, we can kind of ask questions, and they're really open to letting us to really kind of push the issues. Long as if it's coming off surgery, just have to stay along their protocols. But they know, they're like, hey, what is this that they're talking about? Like carrying gear, like how much is that? And I'll explain it to them, right? Hey, this is what it takes, this is what they'll be doing and stuff like that. And they're like, yeah, all right, we're gonna work with them for 2 more weeks, then we're gonna release them. because at that point they're good to go for us, but that's all we can do. We're going to give them to you to kind of finish it off. So our department's really good in the fact that, let's say you were released from PT, right? And you were mentally felt like you weren't ready to go back to duty. You could tell our safety chief, right, that, hey, I'm not comfortable. I don't think I'm where I should be. Can I be given a little bit of a time frame to work with Mike and Aaron and kind of get back? And normally they'll give us 2 to 3 weeks to kind of really start. And not that it gives you enough time for physical adaptations, but we can mentally push you a little bit more, right? And see how you are day in and day out, right? And get you. So we'll start in a weight room, right? Give you some weight on the load, then we'll get closer and closer, and then we're like, all right, let's start putting on some turnout gear, right? And we'll go out back to the burn building or one of the props, and we'll have you do some things. How do you feel after that, right? I feel all right. Well, my back's tight or whatever. All right, well, let's see if you can come back in tomorrow and do it, because the goal here is that whatever we do today, it's not going to be too crazy. I want you to be able to do it tomorrow. So the goal is to build upon that. Now, the lucky thing for me is if we're not to that stage yet and the PT's not comfortable and they're like, hey, here's the list of things that you can do, right? And if they put something, I'm not sure, I just like text my wife or someone and she's like, yeah, like this is what the normal protocol is for this, or this is what you want to look for. This is like the movement dysfunction that tends to come with something like that. So this is what we should do. So it really helps us on our end to kind of have those types of people that we can go to. Now, there's some departments in the U.S. that have PTs and PAs and whatever, and they're ahead of the game, and it creates that bridge program, right, to where they can go from one point to the other. But we're not that, but we're a poor man's version of that, I like to say, right? So I think that's the big thing is it's like if you can create that with your risk management and your safety officers, right, that you can set up a program like this, and then you can create enough friendship between local PT clinics and whatever not, and where they can call and they trust you, right? And trust is not hurting their patients, right? So if you do it enough, right, they're going to start have a better understanding of what your capabilities are, and they're going to give you a little bit more leeway to, hey, push them here, because we don't have the necessary things to do it. Our heaviest weights here are 20-pound pink dumbbells, right? Most firefighters would say they wish everything in the fire service was only 20 pounds, but unfortunately, like, you're grabbing a pair of tools, right? It's not 20 pounds. So, and I think that's one thing that kind of PTs don't really understand. Like, they see the firefighter, right? But they don't see them with the high-rise pack. They don't see them with the extrication tools. Like, they don't understand that world that you live in. They don't understand the lift assist. Let's even just say go that far, right? They don't understand, like, hey, there's me and 3 other people are going to pick up this 500-pound person, right? They don't look at it like that. So it's on our job where we are to get you to, once they start to release you, like, okay, let's ramp this up and make sure that you're able to do this without getting injured and being a repeat offender, not a true offender, but a repeat person on light duty.
I think it was a PT on a while ago now, and they were saying that when an injury feels like it's healed, it's actually only about 80%. And that's why you get a lot of re-injuries. And I see pressure from departments to get their people back fast. And then there's also this kind of almost like faux heroism where it's a badge of honor that you came back before the timeline that your doctor gave you. And I think this is something for people to understand as well, is, getting to the point where it doesn't hurt anymore, where you feel like you're moving well, and then allowing yourself a buffer, because you need to really kind of round off that healing before you go back and again sleep deprived, get some barn burner and you dragging hose and you tweak or pull whatever it is and you go down.
Yeah, you made a good point about the injury. Like, you feel better. Like, this is the best thing I ever learned from PTs. Like, they would truly explain to me like what a graph was like or anything like that, and they'd be like, yeah, it's you think it's healed, but really it's still gelatinous in there, so this is why we can't do this. So it's really helped us now when we come to the fire service to have a better understanding of, like, someone's like, oh, no, I feel fine, I can do this. I'm like, yeah, well, there's a reason why you're not doing that yet in PT, and this is why. Versus there's some real alpha dogs in the fire service that are gonna be go-getters, right? And like, those are the ones that you sometimes got to watch out for, especially if they get hurt. They're like, oh no, my shoulder feels fine, I can do this. I'm like, yeah, but you're not supposed to be doing that. So
yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I want to go to some closing questions. The
Yes, sir.
first one I love to ask, is there a book or are there books that you love to recommend? It can be related to our discussion today or completely unrelated.
Probably most people have read this one, but I love the book Culture Code. I thought it was just a great one. You get to get a better understanding of how different cultures work. I think that's the fire service in general, is that you're taking, and you've probably experienced it firsthand. One station is totally different to another, to another, to another. There's an overall culture of the fire service, but there's a bunch of mini cultures in there, and you better have a good understanding of how each one of those mini cultures work. And there's just, they jokingly, A shift to B shift to C shift, different culture there. So that's probably the book that I think most relates to the fire service, because you hear so many different cultures and how people took aspects of it and building stuff off of it. So,
Brilliant. What about films and documentaries?
oh, I'm a big doc guy. Oh man, you would ask me that one. Oh, uh, hold on, I like Seven Peaks. He goes and he does all the Seven Peaks. It's just the reason on why he does it and just how he does it. I think that's amazing. Like, you're talking small groups of individuals accomplishing big things, which is what the fire service is. If we're talking about fire service, we're talking about guys, an engine truck of 3 or 4 people, and they're going in there and they're saving lives, right? And ideal environment. So I think it kind of resonates that way with it, right? Like small groups, individuals accomplishing big things.
Was that Nimsdai, that one?
Mhm.
Yeah, that was, I think it was 14 Peaks. Have I got that right?
Yeah, well, it was 14. I
Okay.
apologize.
It's
Yeah,
just for people if they're
yeah.
going to Google it. I think it was 14.
Okay.
Brilliant. All right. Well, speaking of amazing people, which I had Nimsa on the show, by the way, he was phenomenal.
Lucky you.
Yeah, exactly. So, we're speaking of that. Is there a person that you recommend to come on this podcast as a guest, speak to the first responders, military, and associated professions of the world?
Yeah, I mentioned him earlier, just because I think it would get a better insight into the research side of things. Is someone like Eric Ryan, Dr. Eric Ryan out at North Carolina in his In Motion lab. I think you get a understanding of where NIOS and the research is trying to go, and why it's important to get your department involved in research, how to go about doing that. My experience with doing that was at an NSCA conference, and Dr. Ryan's wife was there because one of her PhD students was presenting, and I went up and asked her a question about female firefighters and menstrual cycles and whatnot. And she's like, "Oh, well, I think you'd be really interested in talking to my husband." So I think that'd be good. I think this would give people around the country, around the world, maybe opportunities to understand how to get involved in research, what's the benefits of getting involved in research. Yeah, so just so it's not me trying to get the fire service involved in research.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, the next question, is there a person that, what, oh my God, I just went on autopilot then.
You're
God,
good.
this happens when you've done 1,000. Let me write that down. Oh my goodness. 145. All right. Let me try that again. Well, the last question before we make sure everyone knows where to find you, what do you do to decompress?
Oh, uh, obviously I like exercising and whatnot. Um, but probably mountain biking is my big thing to decompress. I like being in nature. I grew up in the middle of the woods. I love hiking. I love camping, stuff like that. That's kind of my go-to. My wife jokes, she's like, she don't understand how I can work with people all the time and then want to be like this solo bird out in nature. I'm like, well, I don't know, just I think it helps me in my day job then. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of my big thing. Just getting out and doing stuff out in nature and whatever not. So that's my big decompressor.
Yeah, I think my answer is because I work with people all the time. That's why I want to go to the woods now.
Right, right, no doubt.
All right. Well, then for people listening, if they want to learn more about you, find you on social media, reach out, where are the best places online?
Yeah, so we have our own social media, First Do Wellness. And then if you just want to find me personally, my personal Instagram is A McKiss. So it's AMCKIS at 1983. So that's my personal one. And then our other one's First Do Wellness. So, and you'll see a lot. We let our interns do a lot of posting on different health aspects, things that we do in our fire academy, things that we might do at EMS. We're just here to try to educate people as much as possible. Are we we're not saying we're the gurus of anything, but we just want to spread the knowledge to first responders primarily. I think they're an underserved community, like we've talked about. Um, you know, I think just recently, they've gotten more into health and wellness and hiring people like myself and whatnot. But yeah, like we've tried to start intern programs to get them out to other departments. I just think it's a good thing. Like these guys give their lives to the community, right? Literally their lives, both physically and mentally to the community. And then at the end of the day, what do they got? Like we talked about earlier, don't have anything, right? So I think this is a way for us as a community, as a fitness community and whatnot, to give back to them for everything that they're doing for us. Be it, like I said, police, fire, EMS. It could go into the tactical setting, but either way, it's a way for all of us to get back. And this stuff isn't just necessarily for the first responder. Like there's information on there that a family member could look at and get and learn and go from, because they're in the trenches too, right? The wife, the daughter, the son, everyone, like, they're the ones that have to be away from the family as well. So it's tough.